Um, it's April 20th, 2022. Linda had on a movie earlier. I don't know, the opening credits, so I don't know what studio was involved, or if it was Century 20, or if it was, I don't really see Universal very much. Or at least they're not accredited for some reason around here in New York. I have to think about this. Mostly it's Century 20. So it was a movie that was entitled How It Ends. And it was literally like sitting in a car, and just the whole movie was driving with very little dialogue. It was very dry. There was extreme weather. There was some shootouts. Nothing, I mean, again, I don't like the realism of the whatever. But it was just driving to a whole bunch of different places, checking on a whole bunch of different things. And there was extreme weather. There was cell phones that were knocked out, and radio that they were trying to listen to until they got to a place where their cell phones came back on. I don't know the backdrop. I don't know the backstory. I see realism out in the field, with possibility and potential, because there was no overcast. There was no narrator. There was no author. There was no narrator. It's just the movie begins and you're in a car. Or for me, I walked in the living room. They were already in a car and they were already driving. Then they found a girl. She got in the car. She was a mechanic. They kept driving. Weird weather patterns started happening. They looked at the magnetrometer, like just a compass, and the compass was spinning all weird, and they drove through that. They had no cell service. Then they came upon a town. They asked for some gas so they could fuel the car so they could keep going. And all the time, it's just like, what's really going on? Then they see like a military train. I think in some places they call it a rail, like on the rail, with flatbeds. It's somewhere, it said shoe on it, SHOE. I don't know what that's relevant to. But it was on the tracks, and something had happened to it, and then it was just like all this abandoned equipment on this thing. And then they got gas from those leftover supplies. It was the most, I'd say, bizarre Hollywood rendition of something, but I don't even know, like, what makes something Hollywood anymore these days? I don't even know. Like, the actors look like they were Hollywood actors, I suppose. It was the guy from Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man I saw. I think he was called the Green Goblin. I mean, that was years ago. I think that was the guy. I don't even know if that was the guy. But I watched the movie as if it was the guy. So, it was just, and it just reminded me, like, that's how life feels right now. It's like you're just driving around in a car, trying not to get shot, not to get entangled with the law enforcement people who are busy doing, like, real big stuff. And just, what do you do? Like, I mean, how do you fit in? How do you contribute? How do you make money? How do you do it legally? And then I got this going on. I turn on the news this afternoon and talk about, like, I had said something earlier about smokestacks and signals. Like the Native Americans used to have these big bonfires and they'd send smoke signals. I find that so interesting. That I would turn on the news and it would have a reference to something along those lines. Now, I don't know, interrelated to one another, but over here, this is significant, and there's 7. And it's starting at 1, and they've got, I don't, and again, I'm not an arson, I don't know fire marshal stuff. I'm not FDNY. In fact, I could barely watch the shows on Chicago Fire because I'm always afraid one of them is going to get hurt. And I'm like, and I can't breathe because I'm a mom, and I'm like, if that was my son, kind of a thing. So, here's the fireman, but you've got 7 buses, and then I know sometimes they do training exercises, but again, I don't know, and how they catch fire and how fire moves, but it hasn't gotten to the last one just yet. But what was interesting was Lee Goldberg does, with the winds for today, where this is breaking news, where the cloud catches, like this these are buses, these are toxic. I would assume this is not good to breathe. That would just be my assumption. It doesn't look like clean air. So it goes up, it gets carried, and it's being carried over to Manhattan. But it's thicker in this area where New Jersey is before it gets there.
The situation better, but of these 7 buses, 6 are just charred remains, and this last one, while it looks like it doesn't have any damage, we did see some smoke pouring up out of that as well, so significant damage to that bus as well. All of these 7 New Jersey Transit buses are just sitting in the middle of a parking lot here along Tunnelly Avenue, and now, as a result of this, some of that water actually coming on those buses from Tunnelly Avenue itself. So on the northbound side, you have got delays that take you back to the circle. Southbound, they have now completely shut down the roadway. So what you need to know is that if you are on Route 3, you are dumped right into this closure, and we have got bumper-to-bumper delays because of that. Also, if you are on 495, you can see the volume building there as well. That's your arrow pointing to the delays that are associated with this. Again, bumper-to-bumper. Unfortunately, it's a terrible, terrible spot for this to happen. And as you mentioned, Bill, that smoke could be seen
on Route 3.
That shooting in Yonkers as well. That's where we first spotted the smoke. Of course, the fire department now getting some water on this, so it's starting to dissipate. But all of these buses are now completely destroyed from this blaze, and the fire department first has to get it out and then figure out what started it. Reporting live over North Bergen, Shannon Soon, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you very much, Shannon. You said it, Lee. You've been watching that smoke. Certainly the conditions are ripe for us to see that here in the city, right?
Yeah, we have a fair amount of wind out there, even though it's come down from yesterday. I know.
I don't know if at Boy Scout camp or, I'm sure the fire department has training where they get to see examples of things and they learn how fire moves, whatever. As a regular public school in New York City, some of these important things are not taught in the local area. How to handle it, what it looks like. Intricacies of fire and how it moves. So I know sometimes they behave differently. Interesting things to a point, but they don't even teach this kind of stuff.
Noticed on the camera shot that I actually have here, looking back from Brooklyn into parts of Manhattan, that the smoke has actually thinned out quite a bit, but it is blowing out of the west-northwest. I don't know if we can go to the weather graphics here just to show you what's going on in terms of where the smoke is going, but you can see it right there. So there's the thinner smoke, and we're looking all the way from Brooklyn here. And the wind is out of the west-northwest. There's going, but you can see it.
Now, that big dark smoke, all you get is this. from Manhattan. That's all you see. And only if you know where to look on the screen can you see the anomaly. But from this side of the bridge, you can't tell what's going on there because of the high skyline. So you don't know unless you have some kind of something. I mean, on this side of the bridge, you look over, I see a cloud. I have no idea where the cloud's coming from. I only know because of the helicopter that something was burning.
Right there. So there's the thinner smoke, and we're looking all the way from Brooklyn here, and the wind is out of the west-northwest. There's still some gusts near 20 miles an hour near North Bergen, so that's coming over the Hudson toward the west side and Midtown as well. So there can be at least some kind of diluted a little bit area of smoke coming across the Hudson if that's what you're seeing. So close your windows if you start.
That's part of the problem of living inside of a industrious city that has built itself up but without proper interborough mechanics or a network. I mean, if something starts burning, that looked like a professional, but if something starts burning over here with one of the non-professionals just because they don't want to pay land, like garbage or like landfill fees and whatnot to the city or the state or the whatever, and they just start burning stuff, how as citizens or like how as residents or people who just breathe in this area, how do we protect ourselves from the people that just think it's okay to just burn this stuff all the time? I mean, and it's not, I mean, there's no benefit to stay here, and there's no benefit to leave, because where do you go? There's not like any offering that's ever been spoken of that I'm aware of.
Start to see that come across, but it looks like it'll continue to thin out as they get the upper hand on that, guys.
Okay, Lee. Thank you. We'll see in a few minutes with their accurate weather forecast. Now to the coronavirus pandemic, and if things weren't already confusing enough, well, here's another change on masking rules in the state of New York. Governor Hochul reiterating that despite the scaling back of federal mask mandates because of a federal judge's order, New York's masking rules are here to stay, at least for now. This is in addition to New York City continuing its...
Now, this is really interesting because these airports, I'm not part of aviation. I know this top one exists only because I've lived near it. I don't know anything about this airport, and I know nothing about Greater Rochester's International Airport. And then it's a Suffolk County Transit for masks being required during this coronavirus on this news program. They don't even speak on a regular basis or even address any of these airports. I don't know if it's a tiered system, but it gets confusing because they exist. I just don't know why they're never even mentioned.
Masking mandates. Hochul's order means airports and transportation hubs that previously said customers could drop their masks now have to reverse course, including Long Island MacArthur Airport and Westchester County Airport. The governor citing the two new subvariants and the rising COVID cases for cause for concern.
We don't know right now what that little bump's going to look like because we're starting to see more cases per 100,000. We're a long way from the peak, but I don't even want to get close to that peak, and that's what we're focused on right now.
Arrests, including Kristen Thornton.
Now, this one piece is interesting. This is about insurance fraud, where they're billing the insurance companies for tests done, almost like they used to say padding the bill back in the day, where you add more things than, or They exaggerate their services and bill for it.
Or live in Central Iceland, where
But what's also weird is, what I don't understand is, there's an RV involved, and he's one man, and then there's several locations. I'm like, now, why does one doctor, like, walk me through this. One doctor who sees patients, he has a practice under this weirdo human development, but then he's got several different state locations. How is he possibly in all of those locations looking after all of those patients? And then he's got this RV that he goes around and he sees patients that are too afraid to come into the office. I'm like, wait a minute. Something's not right.
the doctor just appeared in court. Kristen.
Bill, prosecutors say Dr. Perry Frankel did perform COVID tests for people, but they say what he did not do was have lengthy office visits with these patients, which they say he billed Medicare and Medicaid for $1.3 million. His lawyer, who, by the way, is the former Suffolk County DA, Tim Sini, says that his client did nothing wrong and that his client stepped up during a public health crisis. Prosecutors say Dr. Perry Frankel defrauded Medicare and Medicaid of more than $1.3 million in claims related to COVID testing. They say the 64-year-old cardiologist from Roslyn took the health information of people he tested for COVID.
Now, I'm just curious if we go to a parallel paradox just for a second. Like, don't those Congress people and Senate people and all the job titles that I have no idea what they do really do for a living, and then the people who get mad because their feathers get ruffled, they think somebody called them a funny name, but they can't quite be sure because whatever. And then they bill for hours of law stuff thinking they're going to get reimbursed. I mean, isn't there like a whole racket of those types of people that then after they get burned, they become really bad citizens and tenants and really bad residents? And they cause all sorts of trouble with the other kids that are doing things honestly. I'm just curious.
COVID and submitted fraudulent claims for lengthy office visits that prosecutors say never occurred. His company website shows pictures of his medical facility. He's one of 21 people from across the country who federal authorities have arrested for being involved in various healthcare-related fraud schemes that exploited the COVID-19 pandemic, they say. These schemes, which also included making fake vaccination cards, resulted in more than $149 million in fraudulent proceeds, according to prosecutors.
While millions of Americans were suffering.
I find this so interesting. His name is Polite. Like, Polite. That there's somebody actually named that in the real world? I'm like, oh my gosh, that must have been like the easiest, nicest name to go around and introduce. I'm just polite. I'm polite. I mean, that is, I'm impressed. U.S. Department of Justice, and this has this thing up here for credits. I don't know, he goes by this, which none of us really know what those mean. I mean, I know that they're significant for your placement somewhere. I mean, it would be helpful if some symbolic symbols were really like shown to the children in a way like the alphabet is, so they could follow along to like who to reach out for when to keep house clean, kind of a thing.
And desperately seeking testing and treatment for COVID-19. Some saw an opportunity to profit.
Frankel is the owner of Advanced Cardiovascular Diagnostics in Great Neck, which also has locations in Syracuse, Florida.
Yeah, now that's where I was confused. Why, if he's on Long Island, does he have a Syracuse office, a Boca Raton office, and a California office? How does that work? He's only one guy. So he's spending a quarter of the calendar just moving around with a medical license? I mean, with that level of medical, they're showing that he pokes people with needles and things. I mean, this is scary that these doctors are able to do this. I mean, a neighborhood practice where people get sick, they come in and the doctor, whatever, fixes you is one thing, or diagnoses you is one thing, while the bigger, more important people in the world are doing like really big things, like trying to keep us with clean air, clean water, clean food, clean supply chains, and whatever, and clean future plans. But it's a whole nother when they start doing doctor's practices and traveling. That doesn't make sense.
And one coming soon to Southern California. Frankel became known during the pandemic for using his 40-foot mobile medical bus to do health screenings for.
That's just creepy. That is just absolutely creepy that they're selling equipment onto an RV and going. That also really freaks me out with other stuff that's gone on that I know about on Long Island, where you're just in a restaurant, a place, a thing, just public, and then all of a sudden you get a bee sting, and then you're out. Like, I don't know what this is. I don't know who partakes in this kind of procedure and who's allowed. Like, what are they doing? Why are they here? Where's my government? Like, where are the good guys? Like, one of the good ones. Where's the one I'm supposed to look up to protect me from, like, winding up in one of these just because I walked into a restaurant that some other gathering was there and I didn't know what I was walking into? I mean, like, how do you get to that level of security? And, like, what do they call themselves?
For people who were scared to go to their doctor's offices. Prosecutors say he used the fraudulent funds he took from Medicare and Medicaid and laundered them through shell corporations in the U.S. and transferred the funds to foreign countries to purchase real estate and luxury items.
My organization, as well as our state, local, and federal prosecutors and law.
Real estate and luxury items.
My organization, as well as our state, local, federal prosecutors.
Now, he has NY Office of Inspector General. It does not say New York State in there. I don't know if it's a typo. I don't know if it's a Channel 7 thing. I don't know if they got conflicting reports because there's too many people trying to play the chief in the whatever. But it just says New York office. And I don't know how many offices New York has that houses these inspector generals. Again, it would be really nifty and really helpful if in the local area, like my son's age, he's 10, he would be so, like, you're the superhero walking into the classroom to teach them what you do for a living so they can be like mini superheroes and have something to aspire to in their home state. Why does none of that exist in New York, in my area? It didn't happen for my other kids that I'm aware of either.
Prosecutors and law enforcement partners are going to continue to protect the federally funded healthcare programs that everybody needs during this time.
Frankel was just released on $250,000 bond. As you saw from the piece there, he did not want to speak with me. His lawyer says that it is unfortunate that the government is trying to undermine all of the positive work that Frankel did during the pandemic, and that they will clear his name. We're live in Central Iceland. I'm Kristen Thorne, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Kristen, thank you. Beginning tomorrow, you're going to be able to buy.
It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. And it's April 20th. Yeah, April 20th, 2022.